since last week, but we've never really had a chance to properly introduce her. Gail is the Program Manager for Strategic Communication in the Naval Postgraduate School. And her work is focused on a very interesting theme of inter-organizational collaboration. So the whole conflict management and how you begin to build within organizations and institutions a process and an environment where collaboration can take root. And one of the interesting things she's working on is a diagnostic tool to assess an agency's collaborative capacity, which might all interest us, especially like Tunji's comment in the last session, when you're really not working only within one institution. It's not a single authorizing environment. You really are trying to build a coalition across different organizations with their own institutional mandates. How do you begin to build commitment to a common and a shared goal? So with that, let me turn the session over to Allie.
Okay. So, we're going to talk about middle managers, and we've brought that up several times now, so we're going to kind of go a little bit deeper in talking about that. So I really love this topic. I just taught a whole quarter course at the graduate school on communication for middle managers. Because I think it's just a really rich, complex area. Obviously, we're not going to cover all that material, but the part that's particularly relevant for all of you. So one thing, just to kind of get started, and by the way, Allie's helping me with this. She's going to be helping me with the exercise, doing this with me. So you'll see her help in just a few minutes. So again, with middle managers, what that is implying, right, is positional. When you say middle, it's in relationship to something, right? When you say middle. So just real quick, and I asked Cabby this question, is that thought we'd ask you, how do you think of yourselves? Do you think of yourselves as middle managers, or how would you classify yourself in your organization? Middle, everybody?
But not manager.
But not a manager necessarily. Some of you might be, some not so much, huh? So you might be an analyst or whatever you might be.
Project manager.
Project manager, okay. So some of you have more managerial positions than others. So that's one of the things that's interesting. So with middle managers, and I work in a number of different ways. One in the larger Department of Defense. So in a really big organization, so we maybe have 15 levels of middle managers because there's so many levels in that organization. But also working for a Partnership for Peace, where we work with interagency kinds of things. And so what I find is sometimes you're working middle managers, a manager up a level. You're also working with peers. You may be in a position where you're a senior leader, and it even changes if you think about it, right? If you move from one position to another, even working on a project, your level could change, right? Or your relationship with other managers might change. So all of that, I think, makes this actually pretty interesting. So this is, I think, have you seen this before? Is this familiar? This came out of the materials from World Bank that I had. So basically, just overall, what we're all kind of working for is moving away from these kinds of things of just oriented to hierarchy, input-focused, bureaucratic, fragmented, expert-driven, to something that's more intended to public sentiment, results-driven, client-focused, interdependent, and collaborative. So that's kind of just the overall role, and is thinking about what is middle manager's role in moving from the left to the right. We'll talk more about that in a minute. So basically, the few things we're going to cover in this session, trying to get us back on track, on schedule, is what's that role of the public sector middle manager in reform. We're going to show you kind of this matrix, the 2x2 matrix of empowerment and inclusion. That'll become more obvious when we see it. And trying to figure out what are the different ways that middle managers might behave, and how do we deal with those. And then Allie is going to work with me on the role play here. So, lots of research on middle managers, lots and lots of articles, lots of things on middle managers. One of the one of the first projects I worked on when I came to the Naval Postgraduate School almost 24 years ago was around middle managers. And what they were doing in this particular organization was trying to increase empowerment. So it was that whole movement of just senior leaders kind of making decisions and trying to move it down to lower levels in the organization. And so what they found was in some places in the organization it was working really, really well, and other places it wasn't working at all. So we went and did a research project and started interviewing people, and in particular we did a lot of interviews with middle managers. And what we found was really interesting was there were some people, the middle managers, who said, boy, I love this idea. I've always had it in my mind that I want to empower the people who work for me so that I can move on, that they don't need me anymore. That somebody there is going to be able to take my job and I'm going to be able to move on and it'll be great. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we would find some managers who would be really, really threatened by all of this. Because they'd say, if you empower the workers, who's going to do my job? And workers can't work without supervisors. You can't trust them to, and they were thinking about letting them do things they'd never done before, being empowered. And so there were those who were extremely threatened, and that was where the bottlenecks were. And then, of course, everything in between. So it really took kind of understanding where that threat was for the middle managers and figuring out ways to help them with this organizational change. And that's just within an organization, but it was work across too. So what happens is that with top managers, right, they are always under some kind of pressure. So remember, usually in an organization, when we talk about middle managers, that manager is reporting to someone else and that manager is reporting to someone. And so even, again, I'll use a couple of military examples, try not to use those too much, but for instance, like the 1-star, right? Everybody who is underneath the 1-star admiral says, well, the 1-star is the boss, he's the one who leads, he can do anything he wants. Well, then I do executive sessions with the 1-star admirals. And what does the 1-star admiral say?
2-star. We have a 2-star.
We can't do it. We have a 2-star who's telling us what to do. We don't have the authority to do that. We're just waiting to hear what the 2-star tells us. Then I do sessions with the 2-star. And what does the 2-star say? The 3-star, right? And then the 4-star. And then I talk to the 4-star, and you think, well, the 4-star is the boss, the big boss, right? What does the 4-star say?
President.
I've got the president, I've got Congress, I've got other services, blah, 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 blah. So in some ways, there's nobody really, they've always got pressure. No matter where you are, somebody's got pressure. So when you look up above, some of that behavior is coming from whoever their boss is pushing them. So of course, just like you've been talking about here, is this dynamic system and really understanding the pressures that each of those leaders are under and what kind of creates that behavior that they have. So the middle manager we talked about before is, has a rich repository of knowledge, expertise in and out of the system, so that's the role they play. And they really grease the wheels of anything, and then become the boundary scanners between the up and the down. So you've got this pressure for the middle manager here, and then you've got the people who are reporting to that middle manager who also is creating pressure. So this is for middle managers, if you've not been one before, you might imagine this is a very difficult position, being kind of stuck in the middle in many ways.
It's the worst.
It can be the worst. That's right. So you have pressures from peers, right? Also around resources and those things. So this is really a difficult position to be able to deal with. The other thing I wanted to say too, and what I love about this workshop, this is my 3rd year participating in this, is how all of these modules that you're getting all really fit together. So I'm assuming all of you are kind of creating kind of an integrated roadmap in your head about how these pieces go together. Something that I know that Patty's going to talk about later, I think, and I've heard alluded to several times, is this idea of thinking of an organization as a network. So as I think about organizations now, I'm thinking about all the positions, either inside an organization or outside, and how all that network fits together and how these middle managers fit in that larger network of things. And I know Patty and Rebecca did that stakeholder analysis piece with you. So another way to be thinking about this is, so you have impact up here, right? And positive and negative over here. Is that many times when you're thinking about an organizational change, where are the positions? And sometimes those are going to be departments or middle managers here. and the relationships. It's all about relationships that these people have with others in the organization. And how do we try to shift maybe some of those relationships in order to get our change that we're thinking about. So kind of keep that in mind as we're talking about this, is how this is all relational as part of a larger network.
Can you explain a bit about the boundary span?
Excuse me?
What the boundary?
Oh, gatekeepers are boundary spanners between internal and external. So middle managers are, they serve so many different roles. So I teach middle managers basically. So it's kind of showing them the ways in which they can either impede or help in changes. Middle managers are, in one way, gatekeepers and boundary spanners to the outside environment, right, to all other organizations, because you're going to always have middle managers who are dealing with other organizations. So they can decide whether or not they're going to bring information in, or the way they reframe it, or whatever they do. So they are gatekeepers in some ways for information that's coming in from the outside. They're definitely gatekeepers for ideas. This is one thing we talked a lot about in class, was trying to create innovation and creativity in organizations. So how is it if a lot of times it's these people down here who might have the best ideas, because they're the ones who are on the ground who are actually doing things. But how do those ideas get, and many times those ideas are going to have to go up to the top, because it might be a whole system-wide change. So how do those ideas get up there? So what's the role that the middle manager can play in either helping those ideas flourish, or they kind of stomp them out because they don't pay attention to them?
Filtering.
Pardon?
Some sort of filtering.
Yes, exactly, filtering. Yep. So they are constantly serve as gatekeepers. So for all of you, whatever issues you're working with, right, you're talking to a middle manager, now that person is always going to take that, and of course they're going to think about how's that going to help, or make my job easier or harder, or maybe how it's going to impact my department or something like that. So they're going to filter it, they're going to reframe it, and they often will get to decide, is it going to go up, is it going to go out, how's it going to get twisted. There was an example in the last session with Tom, how something gets turned around. And so they're constantly a filter on your ideas that are coming through. Okay, make sense? So again, the tops often are often the shapers for things, but they often do feel like that they're burdened by what's unmanageable and complex, especially in today's organization. That they are constantly bombarded by, look at what's happening in Europe with the fiscal situations and that kind of thing, is that they're never going to feel like they're in control, right? And things are just changing so rapidly. The middles often feel stuck because they feel stuck in the middle between those that are on the bottom and on the top, like I was saying before earlier. And a lot of times the bottom might feel neglected or not really taken care of. So kind of really understanding that role of the middle manager is really a really important thing to do. There's a good article, a Harvard Business Review article that's, I think, probably the most read Harvard Business Review article, and it's called Leading, it's not Leading Up, I'll have to think of it, it'll come back to me. But it's about understanding how the middle manager can lead with senior management. And really kind of understanding what the role of those people are and the pressures that they're under, and how that really makes a difference in being able to understand where they're coming from. Yes?
Do you think that the agendas of the middle managers and the senior managers can really be aligned together or no?
Can they be aligned? Depends. That's a complicated question, right? But it depends on what you're trying to do and what they're trying to do, and if you can try to find some alignment with that. I'll use this example. So I said I've been working on this in mining projects in a couple of countries. And so the thing is that there are landmines, like I said, that have been laid. And so there are now directives, sometimes from the EU or other places, in order to be mine-free. So it means we've had to work with a lot of different organizations to do that. And so the trick there, though, is to find some alignment around the importance of being mine-free. And you would think, I'm probably like all the rest of you, you think, oh, it's obvious, being mine-free, that we'd all want to work together to make this happen. Not so, right? Turns out that there is a director there who I would imagine is fairly corrupt, who's in charge of the getting the vendors, to come in, and there are different ways in which he selects certain people for his own benefit. One of the first things we did was did a fiscal tracking of where the money comes in from the donors, all the way down to how the money gets spent, and found it's a very, like maybe some of you seen, very spaghetti-like in the organization of where it comes in and who, gets a hand in it and pulls it out. And so trying to figure out ways in which the middle managers and senior managers can line up. And one of the things we'll talk about is all the middle managers aren't the same, right? When you talk about middle managers, it's not like all the middle managers are going to be one thing. Some of them are going to be supportive, not supportive based on certain issues, those types of things. And so really trying to, like in the stakeholder map, or thinking of as a network, you can't think of them all as one thing. You've got to think of them of how are they different and how do they, like in this one project, we're trying to figure out the relationships. This director we know has a lot of control and probably is corrupt, but there are other people who are on other sides of him who are more in line with the goals that we think that we have with this demining issue. Then trying to find people's bosses who, and we found one who obviously is promoting this guy's behavior, but others on that same commission who are not. And so figuring out what those relationships are and how do you adjust middle managers' behavior if you can. Sometimes not directly, but sometimes indirectly through connections, either from above or from sideways. Does that make sense? Yeah, because I'm sure you've probably all seen this in your country. So, if you think about it, on this, looking at this chart again, what is the role, do you think, of a manager who's on an organization or a country that looks more like this versus one that looks like that? How might middle managers' behavior differ in those two situations?
If you have an organisation that's too rigid and bureaucratic, the middle manager is always going to be thinking of themselves and how they can get up the system.
Okay.
And you can actually, in some instances, if you have somebody who understands that their role as gatekeepers is filtering out and supporting their boss so that their boss isn't overwhelmed by information, even though they're having to take on, in a sense, a kind of PA role, or kind of more subservient role. If you can make them understand that this is tactical, in order, and in the long term, the boss will see what they've done and they will get the benefit out of it. But it's quite a lot of complexity.
Exactly. Others. How might a middle manager behave in this type of a situation versus that type of situation? Yes.
Well, in the first one, everybody's attention is inward. It's
Okay.
about the internal hierarchy most of all. And
Right.
in the other one, the perspective is outward looking towards clients' needs. And
Okay.
demands. And it sort of takes away the focus on the internal hierarchy, and in that you're a network. I don't know exactly how a network can at the same time be hierarchical, but I assume that the hierarchy still exists since you're talking about middle
Right.
managers. So I know the focus has moved to more important issues like what the client needs,
Right.
but the whole incentive structure is if you maintain the hierarchy for moving, and the reward structure for moving up, the hierarchy has to be related to the new
That's right.
network structure of incentives and serving the client.
So tell me a little bit more though, what would the middle manager's behavior, so you've described it really well, what would the middle manager's behavior look like in that versus this?
Well, in the first one, they will be sucking up to
Okay.
those above them, basically.
Okay.
And the other one, you will know that the more you can serve clients and show results, the more you will be able to move up the
Okay,
ladder.
similar that you said there. Good. Yes.
Having job description, for the case of Kuwait, for example, a lot of organizations are made in such a way that your job is just a job. There isn't a job description. Therefore, promotion and career advancement is based on connections.
There you go.
And I think that's the biggest problem, because some people feel they're succeeding, they're doing very well,
Right.
but each time it's a miss because you don't even know what you're hitting on. There's
Right.
no target, pretty much.
So
I
if
think
you please the person who can promote you.
exactly. So I think it's really
Right.
important setting up KPIs, knowing what's your objective, what's
Right.
your job, what you're doing, how you can do it right, and how you can do it better.
Right. Because what's your performance evaluation then, right?
It's based on who you know, you know.
Exactly. Okay, so probably very different behaviors, right, for middle managers in this type of environment and this type of environment. And again, as we've all been talking about here, that's not easy to make that shift from one to the other. And it obviously includes the larger system, you know, changing reward systems, you know, those kinds of things that will make a difference. So, based on your experience and what kind of been the roles of, in your own situations of middle managers for the reform process, like here just one or two people. What have you seen in your own organizations? Anybody else hasn't raised their hand yet? And I'll come back to you and see if you've got good examples. Tina?
Well, actually, looking into the reform processes taking place in Turkey, to give an example, actually, the middle managers look up to their superiors, the higher managers, to see the signal from that, that actually the reform has to go forward.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless they see that signal, they're very sort of distant to the idea of the reform. But once they have the go-ahead, then they're embracive, and then they still in the hierarchy of the government, they still order the subordinates to sort of embark on the reform process and do whatever is needed. But still they look up.
Right.
It's
So-
quite hierarchical
So
still.
really understanding that, right, when you're going to go talk to someone and they're going to look up, what can you anticipate might happen, right? And maybe arming those people in some ways of how to lead up, you know, or finding other ways that you can get someone higher up in your organization to impact that person. So there are a number of ways to do that. That's a really good example. Yes?
My own example is actually from a direct experience as a consultant on a World Bank project. 10, 11 years ago, we did water sector reforms in Lagos State. I think the state government had gotten a $200 million World Bank loan to reform the water sector. It was then PSP, private sector participation. The argument was you entirely privatize the water sector, you have some kind of a hybrid. So I went in there as a senior communication advisor, and based on some communication strategy that was designed by the World Bank, but when I was looking at it, I saw some parts of it you couldn't implement, and took a lot of liberty in trying to tweak it. Eventually it happened, but the experience with the middle manager was basically, even although I was born in Lagos, right, to the extent to which you've been out of Lagos and westernized, meant that I was totally out of sync with the culture as it was, the operational culture. And the person who was appointed to drive the process was from without. He came from the private sector. He was an accountant, he had done consultancy work. I just happened to have been a friend and a former university mate. So we were about the same age, but I was amazed about just how brutal this gentleman was in terms of dealing with the middle manager, the whole cadre of the middle management, because we had a specific set of goals we had to change. And so offline, after hours, I was saying, well, why are you so, just almost to the point of cruelty, hard on this, middle manager? So the only thing they understand is pain or pocket. And he did that. I mean, it was almost as if you were whipping them into shape. I mean, the pain was, he forced these reforms down their throat. And the pocket was, you had targets. If you didn't meet your targets, your income suffered as a result. But I look back now, and it was until I had my own brush with the middle managers, thinking that we were all aligned to this grand design of trying to change the water policy and reform it. I discovered that no, there was a lot of resistance. And the only way he succeeded was because he was really, really hard on. There was no space for failures. There was because the interests that were embedded in the system were fighting back. And I can't even begin to tell you to the extent to which the system fought back. You had to have armed guards, armed policemen for about the first 1 year of the project. I mean, it actually had a convoy of about 12 police officers everywhere, 24/7, 24 hours in shifts, because they pushed back. There were all kinds of scams in the procurement part of it. So it's a totally different view. You can collaborate, right? So maybe that's another model, the, you know, pay-per-pocket model. All of this stuff we're talking about would not have worked.
Right, so we're going to talk more about that this afternoon when we talk about negotiation and conflict management, so that's a perfect example for that, so we kind of want to hang on to that. Let me grab you next.
Yeah, I think
Annenberg,
that in my organization, you have a situation where, obviously, just based on your own description, most of these middle managers are experts. They know, besides that, they have been in the organization over a period of time, and therefore, they have a very large reservoir of knowledge as to what's happening before.
That's right, yeah.
What is happening. But unfortunately, you have for the top management, you have a situation where they themselves are being micromanaged by the presidents. So, in as much as you as the expert you think that based on what we have done before, where the pitfalls have been, where we have our successes, what we can do, you interface that with the top management and he's telling you, he's talking to you, and you realize that you are not talking to the gentleman. Because the man is just only a conduit to somebody else. So whilst you are talking to him, he is thinking about what his superior is telling him. So that is a challenge you have. And because you have, in my country, you have a very seriously partisan situation. You may be very honest in dealing with top management. But whilst you are talking, if it is not in sync with what somebody is micromanaging,
That's right.
it tends you want to craft his feeling.
Right.
So that's a challenge you have with,
That's right.
with that. And if you're not careful, you are just isolated. You are just pushed aside.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, one more and then we'll need to move on. Yeah.
Sometimes the same middle managers might work differently under different bosses.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
It would depend, for example, on the personality of the bosses or
Right.
grade managers.
Yes.
Or even the people. Sometimes they would delegate more, they would have a hands-on approach,
Yes,
or they would just have more trust in the middle managers,
that's right.
senior
Yeah.
managers.
Yeah.
So they might work much more independently there.
Yeah, good. Yeah, so we're starting to see the complexity of this, right? So it's not just a middle manager layer, it's not that they're all going to be the same. Even individuals may change based on who their boss is. So kind of understanding the nuances of that is what's really important. Okay? And so, as you heard before, sometimes they think of this middle manager as sometimes the strongest opponents to the changes. And this what they call the layer of clay. Well, what does that mean, layer of clay? Do you remember? Talked about that before.
Nothing can go through it.
Nothing can go through it, right? So they're going to stop, you know, or maybe nothing could come up, could be, right? Ideas coming from up or from the side for many of you, where the ideas are. But you can kind of understand, if you really put yourself in their shoes, the demands that they have all around them, how difficult it is. And so oftentimes it's not against you or your issue or something, it's all the things that are driving them from the system, their organization, their bosses or whatever that's kind of creating that. But kind of understanding that more helps you maybe open the door someplace. So this is the 2x2 that we talked about earlier. And this is one way of thinking about different categories of middle managers and how they may react, different behaviors. So on this axis right here, we have how much they're included in the strategy. You know, have they been included? We talked about before about participatory kinds of things. So this is where they're excluded. This is where they might be included. This is how much they've been empowered. So either they're actively empowered or passive. And so then that creates 4 different types of behaviors that middle managers might have. So, for instance, if ideally, right, if they were empowered and included in the strategy, you probably would have a manager who's more feels empowered, committed, and part of the coalition. So if they were included, let's say, in the get-go of this, whatever your issue was, and having some say about it, it's much more likely that they are going to be positive, right, and be willing to participate. So that's, again, this whole thing about figuring out your initiatives early on and who are those key stakeholders and how do you want those people to be included. And sometimes, you know, in the work I've done, you're not going to have everybody in the room. I mean, sometimes you can do that depending on what strategies you use. But sometimes it's over time and how do you have people participate in so they have a voice in the way that things are happening. Because you're more likely to get, you know, positive from those people who feel like they help create the strategy. And then you have those people who, let's go down here, who are included in the strategy, but feel passive as part of empowerment. So they might be classified as they're compliant, but they'll have no initiative. So they may say, okay, fine, but they're not going to really take the lead, or maybe go to their boss, or go to someone else and really be proactive. On this side down here, you have someone who's been excluded, right, in the strategy, but who are passive in empowerment, and they might be seen as apathetic, so they don't really care. And then up here is probably your worst case, right, is they are resistant and bureaucratic. So they feel like totally excluded, they feel, but they feel empowered, right, in some ways to basically say, you know, go away, leave me alone. Yes?
Can the apathetic be shifted to the first level, being empowered and whatnot? Is
Over
there any
here?
case studies? Yeah.
Yeah,
Can they move
can,
around?
right? Oh yeah, you can move around, right? Based on, again, how do you start to include them in some ways that they feel maybe they have a say. Although it's, you know, again, it's depending on how, you know, in the system, right, where those people are located, and how it is that you can kind of understand where they are and why they are, and if you can shift them someplace else. That'd be a little bit more like your stakeholder map in some ways too, right? Thinking about that. Because that's eventually what you want to do. You have a resistant person here, and you want to try to move them over, because the people over here would be the people who would be positive. The other way we talk about it too is, you know, if you have to, sometimes you're not going to move them over here for whatever reason, or maybe a little bit, but they've got a lot of power. Is there some way you can shift them down so they have less power, but maybe still they're not going to be that positive? So you just kind of have to look at what the situation is and how to deal with that. Make sense? So most of the managers that you've dealt with before ought to fit someplace, not that they're completely independent, but you know, somewhat in those categories. Again, it's just a way to start thinking more carefully about those middle managers and the role that they play. So this was, so this idea about resisting or overcoming resistance from middle managers. So again, I can give a little bit of stories from the things that we did here. So one of the things is we did have is a larger system. We came in to do this demining project, and we did have authority from the top, from the ministers, to do this. But the main person we had to deal with was a middle manager who was very resistant, because it was going to really make a difference in the way he operated things. So, so ways that we worked that was to, we started with a coalition. It turned out that the people who invited us in weren't quite sure what we were doing around interagency, so they actually invited the wrong people. So the first meeting we had people who weren't clearly stakeholders for this. But once we finished that first time, the few people, say 3 people or 4 people who were there said, well, this is really important, and we want to do this. When you come back, can we invite more people from other agencies, and could we have them included? And so by the time we left, we had a really strong coalition from a lot of different agencies around the organization. So in one way, what they did was they started to bring in middle managers from the local governments, from, like I said, NGOs, from whatever, that we started to build a strong coalition of middle managers around this topic. And then within the organization, what was good about them is that they had they had obviously a lot of local knowledge, you know, under the waterline, as Eric was talking about, knowledge about the situation. And so they knew ways in which to work around the system. We tried working directly with the guy, which didn't work very well. And so then we tried other strategies working around and getting support from senior leaders who were supportive. And so that was helpful in that particular situation. What are other ways that you can think of that you might overcome resistance with middle managers? We heard one over here, which was the hard way, right? What are some others? Yeah.
I have in the Iraqi Election Commission a particular middle manager who works with he's the head of the external media section, public information section. And he's been incredibly resistant because he's very frightened that he'll lose his job. He will be exposed as being completely incompetent. So his thing is to have workshops He really likes the idea of having workshops because he gets to invite all his favourite journalists and they go to
Right.
Erbil for 3 days. It's a really, really corrupt system that the UN has basically created in order to deliver. When we had a lot of money for the Iraqi elections, people had so much money they didn't know what to do, so they were flying people all over the place. Now we're limited to just sending them up to northern Iraq, but it's still a very nice place. So I have been trying to get this guy as part of the reform of the public outreach department, and it's just not working. So I'm like biting a bullet now, and I'm going to give him a workshop because I know that's the only way.
Right, you can do that.
It's a kind of bribe in a way, but it's obviously no money to turn in your hands, but it's like, okay, I'll give you that for God's sake, please, just work with me. And that's the only way I can get him on board.
One of the things we did, which was interesting, was that when I came in, they had said, this middle manager said, well, we've created a strategic communication plan and everybody's voices were included. So I thought, well, that's interesting because that doesn't really jive with what I was doing in these other sessions we were having. So when I talked to them, they said, oh yeah, it was almost like this. They said, he invited us and he let us talk, but then we left and he wrote up his own plan. And so, but when we came for subsequent workshops, when we were doing these sessions, for whatever reason, I don't know why, he asked me, because I was the expert from, that came in, would I give a critique of the plan? And I said what I was going to do was talk to the other people and feel like, do they have the voice? And I said what I'd like to do in the workshop is get feedback from all the people in the workshop on ways in which what they like about it and what they'd like to see changed. And so we actually use that as a whole workshop in looking at one process, right? Like what are some ways you might improve the process? And other are specific kinds of feedback they were able to give him on things that could be different in that plan so that eventually they could hopefully create a different process and that the people who were in the room could help, have a voice who thought they had a voice earlier but really didn't, and do that. So that was one way, just using the workshops as a way to gain more voice. And then how to gain support from middle managers. So we're going to talk about that for a little bit. So one is kind of information sharing, and I think it's really, again, getting at these ideas of what is causing the resistance, with these middle managers. And a lot of times, it is fear of these different kinds of things, so is there, some way that you can get around those. Getting people to participate, who weren't able to participate before, and we know age-old story, right? If you can get people to participate early on and they feel like they own it, you're going to get a lot less resistance than if you come up with something and just give it to somebody and say, hey, you do this. That doesn't work very well. And even if you're like, other ways when we go in to do these things, we go do interviews, right, with the Red Cross, with all the different players, so that we're starting to get an ear for where do they want to have a voice, where are they positive, where are they negative, so we can kind of map these stakeholders even before we start a project because we've done a lot of one-on-one with people. So, and ways in which they can feel like they can have some contribution to the process. Vision and motivation, so how it is that you can, things you were talking about before, that they understand the vision and the motivation for whatever it is you're doing. Because a lot of people also may attribute negative in some ways to whatever it is you're doing. So kind of understanding that piece of it. How do they understand? Maybe they've heard things from other people in which they have framed it in some ways that may not be true. And then how do you, in some ways, decrease if there may be, number one, find, are there say-do gaps? Are you saying something but they've seen other behaviors? Because what is, I don't know if Tom mentioned this, but what does say-do gap, what's the consequence of that? If you say one thing and they see you doing something else, what's the consequence? Lose their trust, right? No credibility.
Yeah.
So if you walk in either as a representative of an organization or you yourself come in and they have experienced, whether it's true or not, what perception is reality, we all know that, communicators. If they've experienced the say-do gap, then you won't have much credibility just coming in the door. Social support, giving them the kind of support they might need in order to be able to be more positive towards your thing, and then evaluation and feedback, ways in which they can get feedback in ways in which they might be assisting or not. So what we're going to do is a couple little role plays. We'll do them in time here. And Allie's to try to try some of these. We're going to have 6 of you actually participate in some way. She's got some short little initiatives. And why don't you just start the rest of it?
Okay, so I worked with Shamila to come up with a few brief paragraphs of reform scenarios that you might experience in an organization that you work in. And so we wrote 2 positions for each scenario. One is a senior leader who is sort of trying to convince a middle manager that this reform or this change is something good and useful. So I need volunteers, people that want to act. Yes. Okay, so middle manager or senior leader? You can pick.
Middle manager.
All right. This will be interesting. Okay. Here you go. 2 more. What would you like to be? Middle manager? Senior leader. It's a good choice. Middle manager? Excellent. Here you go. Oh, right here. Sorry. And
So-
1 more pair.
So why don't you want to just read those paragraphs, right?
Yeah, go ahead and start reading. We're going to do the first scenario first. Anyone else?
Who
Brave
wants to do the
souls.
second pair? And like a good teacher, if you don't raise your hand, she'll just hand you your hand to you.
It's fun, I promise. Senior leader or middle manager? Which one? Any, okay, wonderful. We just need 1 more middle manager. I'm going to pick one of you at this table.
Louise
Wanna
is
do it
looking
again?
in every direction.
Okay, what if, Louise? You can do it. All right. Spend a few, 30 seconds, I'll say, reading over the first scenario. And then I'm going to have you come up front. And you're actually going to enact an interaction that would happen between you 2 if you had these actual positions on the issue, okay? And so I know they're brief paragraphs. If there's something missing, you can make it up, just kind of based on what would be appropriate. And we're going to do the same with the next 2 scenarios. Don't know if we should hand these out yet because they give away too much information.
Okay.
I don't know at the end.
But probably before each scenario, I want you to give them all just a little.
Okay, right. So the first one, the first scenario, I'm going to give you all these scenarios at the end, but I want to keep a little bit for the acting. So the first scenario that we wrote is a budget transparency initiative. So it's a local government that's sort of right outside of capital cities in the country. And they are implementing a budget transparency initiative, which they think will give more power to the citizens. So they're going to be publishing information about the budget on their website. Citizens will have more access to it. There are people who support this, think it will help to root out corruption. There are people who are opposed to this. They think that it will give too much power to the citizens, and the citizens will effectively, slow the government to a halt with all of their sort of checking in. So we have our senior leader, and we have our middle manager. And for the middle managers, we took the 3 quadrants on that chart that you saw that were the slightly more difficult middle managers. So you have the one in the top right, which is the empowered middle manager. We took the other 3. And so we're going to have you enact the scenario. We're going to try to assess which one it was and what the strategy was that the senior leader used to sort of persuade the middle manager of the benefit of the reform. All right? You guys ready?
Okay.
Let's give it a shot. You have about a couple minutes to sort of go through the
So
first
Jackie
scenario.
is the resistant middle manager, right?
Yeah.
And Ferris is going to be the senior leader in this case.
Wow, it's too exciting.
It is wonderful. You come here. You just,
Can we start?
yeah, go ahead.
Hey Jackie, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
How's your day going?
Very good.
So listen, I've been just with the upper management.
Mhm.
I'm discussing about reforming the whole country and reforming new policies. And I know we've talked about it earlier last week that there's going to be a lot of changes going on in the organization.
No, I don't remember that conversation.
On point!
I don't remember about any of these changes. So what are your proposed changes?
So listen, you know how we've been sitting on a lot of cash, and we've been spending it left and right, and a lot of people have been getting...
Sorry, we? I don't see what's money being spent. And one of my big problems here, I don't think you really understand. These people out here are ignorant. They have no idea how government works. Every time you try and come and bring them new water or new education, I get this, yeah, women aren't invited, we aren't involved. Of course they're not involved. How many of them have been to school? How many of them have got PhDs? None of them. These are peasants. They know nothing about how government works. And you want me to come in and let them into my office? You want them to come and manage the country?
You're not listening to me. So this is what's going to happen. You've got word, and I've got things to do. So this is what's going to happen. We have to change the way we dispense the money. We have to reform the whole system. So from now on, we're going to have more accountability. People are going to know how much is our budget, what we're spending it on, and how we're spending it on.
Fine, go and do that. Fine, absolutely, no worries. But you're not coming to my office. And you're not having my bank account details. And you are not going to be part of any of the committees that are being set up all over the place. You don't belong here. This is not your county. It is not your city. It is my city. I know you.
Jackie, listen to me very well. I have a lot of friends in high positions, and I can make your life heaven or hell. I suggest you decide and you craft your next words very carefully. There's two ways this can go, and you can leave my door with two options. I prefer you go with option A as opposed to option B. Option A, you're on board fully backing me up, and I'll make sure you have a fast track to a career promotion in the next 6 months. Or option B, you leave this room, and you can also leave your resignation, and have someone else replace you immediately.
So who are these people that you're going to be talking to?
The president, the vice president, and the whole government.
And the career promotion is what would that look like?
Double your package and a senior leader position.
Okay. I have to hand it to Jackie because she was an exceptionally good.
I was scared.
She's tough. I don't want her to.
Oh my goodness. Let's all hope we don't have to manage Jackie. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what you guys were told. So Jackie, what was your motivation for resisting? So you felt like it was not his place, but did you have any other, was there anything else you were told?
Well, I was very concerned that if there was real transparency, that in fact my little, the payments on the side that were helping with my family would be uncovered. So I really had a lot to lose.
Right. And so did you know that?
I had no idea.
Yeah. So even though you used corruption to address her corruption, you didn't know that she was corrupt in the first place. So this is the kind of thing that that we have to deal with when we have resistant managers. They have motives that are hidden. We don't know what they are all the time. They almost always, we all have motives that are not exposed and are not in the open. And so that's something to consider. So, I mean, ultimately, what do you think about how the senior manager dealt with this situation? Yeah.
Well, I think he was lucky to actually have some sanctions to impose.
Yeah.
Because
We don't all
normally
have
you
that.
don't.
Yeah.
You don't have that luxury, so you invented that creatively in the moment, but in many cases you don't have that kind of sanctions, and you just have to find other ways of dealing and motivating.
What other ways?
I mean, if you can't affect the pay grade or the rate, you can still increase that person's power in the organization by giving them more exposure and like there's
Projects or
projects, lead projects or lead teams, so you feel more important vis-a-vis subordinates and things like that.
Just a side note, I mean, with regards to that, I know this is a fact. A lot of senior leaders, maybe they don't have influence, but they show in situations they have influence and take it as a gamble. And most of the time they win because they're more senior as opposed to the middle manager.
Jackie, what's a way that you might have been more on board with this? What were some of the things that, just in the way it was presented to you? And
Well, my first response was, okay, this guy's coming out of nowhere and he's telling me how to run my fiefdom. This is my fiefdom.
Right, yeah.
These are my people. And so, you know, this person doesn't know. And, you know, I think the idea that, okay, these people really don't understand things is, I put it harshly, but some people honestly think that, you know, they don't have, you know, they're peasants, they're people from the country, they really don't understand the complexities of what we're doing. So maybe one way would have been for, you know, a kind of strategy to have got together the so-called ignorant peasants and shown that actually not all of them are ignorant, and they are able to challenge according to, you know, I'm obviously focusing on degrees, on, you know, academic education, because that's where my mindset's coming from, and, you know, that's why I'm trying to get my children out of this. So if you had, you know, identified community leaders who also have degrees, who were able to come by the side and say, listen, you know, we're all here with you on this, and we can all work together against this outsider.
good. And there's a question, or Hannah.
And sometimes the leader, the senior leader, is in a position that is not a good leader. In some organizations, they achieve this level in the hierarchy because they are good expertise in some areas, but not necessarily they are good leaders. And to conduct this kind of discussion and negotiations, the person has to be prepared, well prepared, because the approach is very important.
Well, they may not be the best person, right? It's kind of
Yeah.
what you're saying even.
Yeah.
So it may even be the senior leader finds other avenues, right, in understanding your motive. But this happens so frequently that, you know, I'm sure, you know, you as the senior leader worked with all your strategy people, worked this all out, and you're just convinced it's a great idea and everybody just gotta get on board here. And then you're surprised when all of a sudden, whoa, people don't see it the same way you did. And then we get this, and then it starts to spiral, sometimes out of control.
I think what's also really important is like this exact situation is the point of no return. Whether it goes
Yes.
option A, option
There
B,
you go.
or even none of the option and she's still stagnant,
Right.
that's when it's done. She's
Right.
emotionally or career-wise shut off and
Yeah.
it's dead. I mean,
And then this is not a good situation for you either, because now she's gonna go back and tell all of her buddies what just happened. And if you haven't talked to them yet, people who she's aligned with and has credibility, you got a real mess on your hands.
Yeah.
Tom?
Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, the real challenge of the I know senior people is in a lot of these situations, the person you're dealing with knows senior people too. And has sources of power in the organization that can really mess you up. And you have to really be cautious, especially in cultures or countries where they're kind of loose networks or I mean rather tight, you know, relatives and this and that. Like in China, if you pulled this, I would really have anxiety that somebody would say, yeah, well, my brother-in-law is, and suddenly you got a problem. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So if you invoke that kind of power, it's very risky for both.
it's a gamble. I mean,
It's a big gamble.
Yeah.
My question is, at what point do you think it's important to sometimes use threats? Because in the conversation, you realize that clearly, when the senior manager, the senior person realized, look, he could not use any rational argument to convince this person, he decided to threaten. The question then is, at what point do you think that tool is good?
The reform.
Yeah, for reform. Assuming that you really want to convince. He was struggling to convince that he asked why they need to go that far. That was very reluctant to move because of their own interest. But at one point, what he did was he decided to threaten and wait for two reasons. Either Jackie really believed that he could carry on his threat, or because he saw that the incentives that came with the threat were good for him. So at what point do you go for that?
What point do you go for that? I would say you don't go for that.
I mean, the
But it's
idea.
real life situations here.
Yeah, they are. The point, I mean, one point is that obviously Jackie is motivated. You have to understand what's motivating the person who's resisting. There's something that's making them resist. I mean, in this case, maybe there were personal motivations. And there might be personal motivations that he can use to convince her that aren't corrupt. There might be ways that this change, ways that this change could benefit her in her job personally. So, Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it would work necessarily, but that's one way to think about it, is that you have to match your persuasion and your incentives to their motivations. It's not necessarily easy, it's not going to work every time, but if you're trying to convince her that this is the moral thing to do and she is getting side payments and all she cares about is her personal motivation, that's not going to work, right?
I think also, I mean, just thinking about what we just acted, we have a picture in our mind, ideally, how things will go down in reality, but once you're on spot and you're in the situation, it's completely different.
Yeah.
It just gets heightened, and it's the excitement, it's a rush, it's like, it's a boxing match, you know?
Yes.
It's like, I gotta win it,
Exactly.
it's my say or get out of here.
Especially males.
I think it's also
Males
some-
engage in this very
Yeah,
differently than women.
I think it's also something to be, taking into consideration here as a function of timing, right? There's always that window of opportunity when you have these negotiations where, for instance, if Jackie's own stake or sense of herself and her power base is solid, and it might just be a temporal feeling, and you attack on the basis of that, you're not going to succeed. So if you're a leader and you're looking at the entire landscape, you strike at the moment of maximum doubt, uncertainty, right? Maximum fear, uncertainty, and doubt. That's the point at which you're going to make this change. That's what you do. Because it's just a function of timing. It might just be from week to week. It might not, maybe not this week. Then something else happens, and there's this big story in the newspaper about corruption, and everybody's. That's the time you call Jackie. You know what?
Yeah.
There's this thing that's happening, and I think you'll be of interest to get on board or get squashed by it. So there's always that point of timing.
Another aspect of that is, I mean, the bigger picture is the planning that goes into this, expecting that response is going to happen, and then saying, what do I do about it? Or expecting another response, and then planning for that. So when you have practiced and thought through and considered the possibilities, you're better equipped than if you get in that situation like a deer in the headlights, you don't know what to do.
Okay, can we also refine the moral argument thing? Because using corruption to fight how did you put it? Corruption
To fight corruption.
To fight corruption in a sense, it might seem counterintuitive. But in real life situations, there's an analog to that, which is what I was trying to allude to, in terms of using just a psychological strategy of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It's a very powerful motivator, because the person who's doing all of this stuff know they're corrupt, and there's always that latent fear of being discovered. If you had gone and said, okay, oh, by the way, I also know all these your side gigs, right? I know all this stuff you're doing. I want you to ignore that. I'm going to help you make some more money, but legitimately, you have to support this.
Yeah.
That might be a positive incentive as opposed to a negative incentive. The second line of argument will be, okay, by the way, if you back off from this, I'm going after that.
Right.
Because I'm now empowered under this new anti-corruption transparency thing to actually go for that. And I will go up for that. Not so much as going for you per se as a target, but I will attack your practice, yes.
So I'm going to talk about, this afternoon, we're going to talk about negotiation and conflict management, which is really core to what we're talking about right now. And so research shows that in the long run, collaborative kinds of processes are better. Although we'll also talk about 4 other, like styles instrument, right? But also, as I'm hearing all of you talk, remember that in the long run, if we want to try to build a culture, right, and norms that are more collaborative, the styles that you use, and sometimes there are automatic styles, are setting an example for people, right? So if you use the competitive, if you use, those kinds of things frequently, you set up a norm of that's the way we're going to operate around here. And I don't think that's what you want in the long run. So being able to, and Ferris, like you're saying, really, and it goes back to Eric talking about knowing yourself, knowing under what kind of conditions you get set up like this, and being able, like a little red flag to raise and say, oops, I can feel my temperature rising, I can feel me going whatever. And then having a set of tools, like Allie said, that what are my other choices here? And thinking about, if I go down this path, what's the long range, where are we going with this? And it's not pretty. Just to get immediate satisfaction in, I won kind of thing. So we're going to talk,
So the last quick note, I'm just self-reflecting on this. I think my biggest fear in the situation was Jackie's perception of me, of not being weak in this situation.
Absolutely.
And not leaving the room saying, yeah, he was weak,
there you go.
and I can get away with anything, That's
Right.
it.
It's good. Okay, what do you next?
Number 2, who's on scenario 2? All right, are you guys ready?
You want to give a quick little setup?
The second scenario, we have the National Census Bureau. And the organization is undergoing a digitization effort where they're moving from paper to sort of computer system to manage census records. So champions of the reform believe that the increased efficiency will save the Census Bureau a lot of money in the end. But there are a lot of employees who are concerned that their jobs will become obsolete because of the efficiencies created, and they're also concerned that they don't have the digital skills that will be necessary to work in the organization in the future. So we have our senior leader, you, and we have our middle manager, Ari.
And this middle manager is
This is the apathetic middle manager.
apathetic, doesn't really care.
Hello, good morning, Madam Maya. Yeah, I'm so glad this morning I have to introduce you to something new that is coming. You remember last time we had the census? It was analyzed that we used a lot of money and the system was not efficient, and so that the results were not accurate. So we are going to introduce a new system, which is digital, and it's very exciting because this will lead to everybody getting a computer, and within the package you get trained, all of you, the managers and everybody, and it will help us really link up the data quickly and get results more efficiently. So I'm telling you this because I really want you to get involved in advocating for this intervention, and within your constituency to identify people who get to go to the first training.
Sorry, I thought she's supposed to dissuade me from...
Persuade you. She's supposed to persuade you to support.
Dissuade me,
Oh,
right?
persuade.
Okay. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
So she was not listening.
That's part of the problem.
That's part of the problem.
Middle manager problem.
Okay, so what is your take on this?
I'm not convinced. I don't have strong views on this, but I'm not convinced, given you yourself said that last time was a big failure, so I'm not convinced that this time's going to work. So I think it should be status quo. We shouldn't get any more new computers and waste money and put people up for training, you know. I think we should just stay with the system for a little time and see what's new in the market in a few more years, then maybe we'll think about this again. Revisit this in 3 years' time.
Oh no, because this is really taking us backwards. You know, we have this at stake. We have
I don't
really
think so.
a lot of money.
I don't think so. It's
And
going
we
to
are going to
step us
benefit from this.
because I don't see our earnings dropping. I don't see efficiencies dropping. You know, so I'm not really convinced. I think.
Do you see this graph? You see, this is the money we use in collecting data. Yes,
I think
know.
a year ago you brought a similar. And look where we are, you know. So,
No,
you know, so
because last year there was a
I'm really
company which was
questioning the
missing.
credibility of the research that you're showing me. I'm not really convinced. I think you should go back and do more research, spend more time,
These
and
have
come
been
back
proven.
with more credible data.
No,
This time,
I want you really to look at this with from the manager's point of view, because this money that we are losing, you know, if we use the computer system, we're going to save all this, and all this will come back to you in terms of.
you know, only yesterday I had lunch with the accountant of the company, and he was showing me different data. So I think you should
Because that is all going to be corrected, because this information
I recall
now.
having the same conversation.
Okay, so we
That was
don't.
probably been a little bit more on the resistance side.
Yeah, a little bit resistant, but you know, so Gail was saying earlier when we were looking at the matrix that the resistant manager was the hardest manager to deal with, the one that was in that quadrant. I actually might disagree that actually the apathetic manager is harder.
No, I thought there was no apathy in what she was doing.
She was resisting, but just think if she was really just didn't care. She was like, okay, sure, but you know, I'm not really excited about this. I'm not really going to help you with it, if you know. So not even compliant, but just, excuse me, just to the point where she just doesn't have any excitement about it or any enthusiasm or any interest. Do you find that would be harder to deal with than resistance?
Yes.
Yes.
And why? Yeah.
because you really do not even know why the person is very interested.
Right.
Because if you know why the person is very
Right.
interested, you could work on that.
Yes.
But you just don't know. You don't have
Resistance is
information.
at least they're invested in it, and you can
Yeah.
maybe turn that investment. But if they're not even invested, they don't care.
And-
What do
and-
you do?
And the other thing also is that with a pathetic manager, there's no sense of danger or consequences for not engaging.
Right.
So, I mean, if there's no fear factor, there's no cost.
2G needs fear to operate.
Well, paranoid, what do you want? No, but in her own case, in the resistance is apathetic because there's absolutely no consequence to her welfare. She can be apathetic about the reform process, but she can't be apathetic about her own welfare. And I think the thing is how to, break through the proposition of reforms to get to where she is and say, okay, well, you're not going to be apathetic about yourself. You say, for instance, that, well, part of this whole thing has to do with job training, and then the next set of evaluations will mean that if you're not computer literate, and you don't know, this system is going to be introduced anyway. So it's in your own career interest to understand it, and it might benefit you, right? And allow her to make a choice. I think there has to be some kind of a cost-benefit analysis embedded in there for her to make a decision to bring out of our country. Otherwise, there's no cost.
So you somehow have to persuade them to care.
Yeah,
You
on
have
the
to-
basis of their own enlightened self-interest, not because she wants to do the project, but she realized that, well, if I'm not part of this, there might be some cost to my career.
So part of it also is like understanding where the apathy is coming from, right? Which might be harder in some ways because you're going to probably have to dig for it a little bit to figure out where is that apathy coming from.
You've also got to be, that the idea that, oh yes, last year you said the same thing, and
Right.
especially when you're dealing with organisations where, let's say in any country you're going to have several attempts by different actors to try and change things. So, oh, not again. God. And that you really actually got to deal with the mistakes of the past by other people that you might not even know about.
And the other thing here, you still got the same issue if people are just kind of, get on board, right? If they didn't participate, sometimes you can move that apathy to caring if they would have participated earlier and maybe given a role. If they're an important person, they're given a role, that could also help.
There might be also a way in which you expand the framing of the engagement. I mean, the idea of digital means you're moving from some system to another one.
Right.
You personalize it. I'm sure by the time you're a middle manager, you'll have a family, you probably have kids. And your kids are digital to some extent to which they are aware of that. If you use that as a point of persuasion, that, this is what everybody's doing. Your kids are on Facebook and this and the other. You might be, chip away at the ice a little bit and get her to understand that the benefit is not just necessarily for a professional career, but it might enable her to interact and understand what her kids are doing. I don't know if that would work, but a personal approach as well as professional could help.
But you see, it also depends on where the part of the world you're coming
Yeah, true.
Sure.
from. Because, for example, if you take Africa, right, the moment you get here of anything, computers and other things, people think about job threats. The fact that the moment you start introducing these things, very soon you're going to be redundant. And so the better they stop the thing from entering, then it's better for them. So it sometimes depends on the area and the extent to which you can convince them that they can be retooled to perform other functions. That is the point.
But everyone has a point. Do you now present the job training retool as the first thing, as opposed to reform?
Yeah. So
you switch the proposition and say, instead of saying that we're going to do sensors, we want to train you to conduct better sensors next year. I don't know.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
So you give them the skills they need.
Yeah, you reframe it, you flip it. Instead of talking about the sensors, talk about the job retraining, and then now explain to her why that job retraining is important.
That's good.
Good.
All right, we have one more. We're going to do it really quickly.
Sorry.
Yeah.
The way the meeting was abruptly concluded, I was thinking maybe the team leader would have said, let's go for coffee.
No, sir, just give it up.
All right, so, yeah.
Do we really have to convince always the middle manager, the senior manager? Because he has his job description and he knows what he's supposed to do.
Probably not always, but here's the thing. The middle manager, as Gail was saying, is this this gatekeeper between the bottom level and the top, and they have a lot of control over those people below them. And sometimes they will have an impact on whether those people will follow you into the change or not, and that can have a real impact on the change effort, right? In some cases,
The
depending on the
reason
structure
why
of the
I'm saying
organization.
that there are some organizations which are not really very hierarchical.
True.
And you find that, for instance, one the department is separate from the other, and
Right.
yet there should be a network that they are in. So I'm wondering now how you get the message from the top, the top manager of the whole organization, and the chief of the department will come and talk to his staff or to her staff, and these ones have to execute. So they don't really have any contact with the highest manager of the organization.
It's possible. I mean, all organizations are different. It's just an example of, there are some organizations, like Gail was saying, in her organization that have 15 different levels of middle managers, and those people really do have impacts on the people below them. So not every case, and depending on the size of the organization for sure, but in many cases it will be important.
But here's the problem with Jackie's scenario, right? If she had subordinates, what do you think when this change starts to happen? What's she gonna, how's she gonna be supportive of it or not? Or it's possible also, she'll in that way or other way she may try to sabotage it. She's not gonna say that up front, but you better well believe she'll do what she can behind the scenes, because now she's even probably ticked off at the way his attitude, not just the change itself. So it spirals into ways that that the chances of you creating a change if it goes along this route are going to be extremely difficult. It's not a good path.
I think in playing the role, one of the reasons, one, there was no motivation, and the second was, according to the role I'm playing, there's no impact on my division. So I think it's useful.
Well, not no impact, but not as big of an impact.
Not big of an impact. So probably the person who played the role, I think, it could have done some background to see what kind of impact, then made the pitch.
In that case, there's a reason for her difference. She doesn't feel like she's gonna, her job or her division will be very impacted, and the frame probably has to be something about the organization moving forward or something bigger, about the bigger purpose, because that.
Yeah, because if my job is not going to be impacted, it's not going to have any efficiency.
Why should I care? Right? You're just giving me extra work for what reason?
Yeah.
And this is really critical in change management, because if you can explain to people that by sort of getting on with the reorganization or the change effort, your life, you have got lots of opportunities that are opening for yourself. And that's something that people don't recognize. And when you look at the options, I mean, you can resist, but then you're going to be marginalized. You can do nothing. But if you cooperate and you are one of the first ones to get moving with the change management, it opens all sort of opportunities in your career. And I think that arguments need to be made constantly to middle managers.
Good point. We have to probably out of time.
Yeah, sorry, number 3.
Good discussion, guys. Yeah.
Out of time. I think we're out of time.
Oh, okay, no problem.
So,
I was ready to be remember that initiative, but.
Maybe when we come back.
So anyway, good discussion. You did a great job, and I think you all really see the nuances of this. And so what's going to be key, of course, what we've talked about here is coming up with some skills in order to, as part of this change effort, and handling conflict and handling these different understanding motivations, in order to move that middle manager. Because the middle manager is going to be absolutely key, central to any change effort we're going to make. And if you don't, I'm just telling people to get on board, that is not the way to do it, okay? That's the way we'd like to do it, but that's not the way it happens. The other thing real quick too, because I deal with these large-scale changes in my own organization so many times, is that whoever comes up with the change has already thought it through, obviously is convinced, has people around them that think it's a great idea, so they just want to hand it off and get it implemented.
Yeah.
And they want to be done with it, and everybody ought to get it, right? Just go implement. And then they're ready to go on to the next change effort. But you have to remember, at every level or every place in the organization, everyone's got to go through that same, why are we doing this? Why is it important? Know why, feel why kinds of things before they're ready to move. And senior leaders just want to, go on to the next one, and they forget that there's going to be this trail is going to have to happen in order for those changes to come on board. So really understand that. Plus, this is what you're here for these 2 weeks ago. So good job, great role playing, good cases, Allie.
That was fun.
Nice job. So Kevin,
Thank
what's
you.
the next?
Thank you, Gail, and thanks for getting us back on track.